committee meeting. Welcome everyone. And Connie, did you want to get some housekeeping done?
Sure. This is Connie Swisher, recording secretary for the Deferred Comp Advisory Committee meeting. Today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by the AB 361. Staff members may participate via phone, video conferencing, and or through hybrid in-person and remote attendance. We are providing live video and live streaming. Members of the public wishing to make a public comment can do so in 3 ways: via this Zoom meeting, also by submitting an email or leaving a voicemail. This information is noted on the agenda located at the Park District website at www.ebparks.org. And if there's no other questions, we can proceed with the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so our first agenda item is approval of the July and August meeting minutes. Did you all have a chance to take a look at the minutes? If someone would like to make a motion to approve the minutes, I would suggest doing so individually per month.
I'll move.
Okay. Did you want to start with the July?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion to approve the July Deferred Comp Advisory Committee minutes.
And I'll second that.
Okay. We have a second. Any discussion on the item? Any corrections that need to be made? Okay. Hearing none. We'll go for a vote. So we have myself, we have Deb, Monica, and Pete and Janet voting. So if you all could let us know your vote by raise of hands. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Okay. So I had 3. Janet, did you? Okay, she's an aye. That's okay. And myself. Huh. Okay, there we are. All right, so the ayes have it. Okay, any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. So Pete, would you like to make the motion for the August minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion for the August minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Deb. We have a second. So any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. Okay, all those opposed and any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Yep.
Chair Darcy, just for the record, when we're doing votes, you should just state the vote if you don't do roll call. So for the record, both minute meetings were a unanimous 5-0 vote.
Thank you. I will do so. Okay. So we have the next up, we have Jason for our Brown Act presentation. We also potentially have a public comment, but I don't see them here yet. And if they do come, they can make it after that, or we'll find a place for them somewhere in the agenda. So take it away, Jason.
Thank you very much. So as this committee is subject to the Brown Act, I thought it'd be helpful for the committee to get an introduction to the Brown Act requirements. This is a presentation that I've given to other committees that are subject to the Brown Act and recording secretaries. So I will run through this stuff relatively quickly. It says that I'm scheduled for 10 minutes. I'll try to stick to that, and just know this is an introduction to this. This might be new for some of you, so I want you to be aware of these concepts. You don't have to get every single item I bring in this presentation, but getting you introduced to the concept of an open and public meeting that the Deferred Comp Committee will run as, and want you to start to feel free to ask me questions about the Brown Act issues if they do come up. I'm gonna let me try to share my screen now. Hold on a second. Okay. Can everyone see the page that says Ralph M. Brown Act and hear me still?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So the Brown Act is named after Ralph M. Brown. That is him right there. And it was passed as a result of a number of California state legislative meetings or events happening kind of behind closed doors. And he felt that that wasn't appropriate and that meetings of the public of elected bodies should be open in public. So that's kind of the origin of why we're here. When you hear the Brown Act, it's this individual, longtime California legislator, Ralph M. Brown. So I also have a picture on this. This is the League of California Cities has a guide, open in public, a guide to the Ralph M. Brown Act. It's a really useful guide. Good for lawyers and non-lawyers alike, for practitioners. It's a helpful reference. So if you want to go further and understand some of the elements of the Brown Act, feel free to look for that. It's just League of Cities, open in public, or ask me afterwards and I can email it to the committee. So the Brown Act, in short, is meeting, it kind of has, I broke down the actual statute to really to the key parts, which is meetings of a legislative body shall be open in public, and you as a deferred comp committee are our legislative body, so they need to be open, available to the public, and have an agenda and opportunity for public to comment. And I'll go into more of this as we go. I will try to leave a few minutes for comments at the end, but if there's something you want to interrupt me, just raise your hand and get my attention, but I will make time available at the end for questions. So what's a legislative body? So it can be a number of different forms. It could be the governing body, which would, in our situation, be the board of directors for the East Bay Regional Park District. It could be an appointed body. So an example of that would be this body, or a standing committee. So let's say the Finance Committee or the Natural Resources Committee would be an example of a standing committee. What's not a legislative body is an ad hoc committee, which is less than a quorum and only convened for a discrete purpose that then disbands. So because we are an appointed body by the board of directors, we are subject to the Brown Act. And then every reference in the Brown Act to a legislative body includes this deferred comp committee. Here are some examples that I put forward that are, standing committees are these: the executive, finance, legislative, operations, and then deferred comp is not a standing committee of the board itself, but it is an appointed committee. So it has a standing existence. It's not ad hoc. And then other Brown Act committees as are listed there. So Brown Act definition of meetings: it is a congregation of a majority of members at the same time and place to hear, discuss, or deliberate on an item of business within the agency's subject matter jurisdiction. So for deferred comp committee's purposes, your agency's subject matter jurisdiction is matters referring to deferred compensation. It is not anything within the purview of the park district. Excuse me, park district. And hold on, did I skip one? There we go. So the Brown Act definition of meetings, there are some exceptions as well. Of course, we can't have statutes without exceptions to the rules. So some of these exceptions are attending a conference, going to a community meeting, going to a social event, having one-on-one meetings with someone, or going to another meeting. Let's say if all of the deferred comp committee attended a board meeting of the park district or a council meeting that has its own agenda and notice, although you're all in attendance, you're not, that by attending itself, that's not considered a meeting of the deferred compensation committee. However, you do need to keep in mind that there are, even if you're at a meeting that is not the deferred comp committee and you're allowed to be there, if you start to discuss items of deferred compensation committee in the corner, that could be a problem. And I'll get to that in a second. And then there's also closed sessions. So here we go. Make sure you guys are all listening. I have a couple questions. So can some or all board members show up at the following events together? A city council meeting of a city within the district, a local meeting of Environmental Action Coalition, a collective briefing with staff before a meeting, a staff holiday reception, and NAGDA conference. So I mean, you guys can think about it. Normally this is given in a more open, informal setting. So I'd kind of encourage questions from the crowd, but on this one, I'm just going to kind of run through these answers. So council meeting, yes. Local agency meeting of Environmental Action Coalition, yes. Collective briefing with staff before a meeting, no quorum. So it has to be less than the majority of the board. So for this purposes, 2 deferred compensation members could attend a briefing before a meeting. NAGDA conference and a staff holiday reception, yes, you can attend those. However, this is the big but. Even if it is allowed to attend, you cannot discuss amongst yourselves matters within the agency's jurisdiction. So if you're at a holiday reception, again, you can't go huddle at a table and talk about how you're going to vote on a matter that would be coming before the Deferred Compensation Committee. And that is kind of segues into the idea of avoiding serial meetings. So outside of a noticed and public meeting, a majority of the board cannot discuss, deliberate, or take action by direct communication, intermediaries, or technology. So these days, technology is almost easier to violate the Brown Act than in person. So what you can't do in person, you also cannot do over email, text, or social media. So if you can't huddle in a back room and talk about an item of the board, the committee's business, you also can't do that on Facebook or Twitter or on another social app. These days, with city attorneys and public agency attorneys, Nextdoor is an area that causes a lot of city attorneys stress because of its opportunity for council members to jump in and start to create a discussion outside of an agendized meeting. So here's some examples. There's 2 different types of serial meetings. There's the hub and spoke, and that's where one member who's not on the committee is kind of the center, the hub, and then they're talking to all the other members and relaying information from one to another. So that's one type of example of a serial meeting, and the other is considered a daisy chain, where A talks to B, B talks to C, C talks to D, until a quorum has discussed and taken action. So both of these are not allowed, or a no-no, and you want to avoid these. Again, I mentioned this before, emails is real easy. The reply all is a dangerous thing for public agency boards. So if you're replying to someone about a scheduling matter, you can do that. But even if your reply all is innocuous, you're kind of creating what I like to call as a petri dish for future Brown Act violations. So if there's something that you want to relay to a staff member about scheduling or putting on the agenda, send it to the staff member who's in charge, and then they will be sure to get that information, but not creating an area where other board members can weigh in on merits that would be best discussed before the board in an agendized meeting. So, okay, here's another example just to break it up a little bit. So a board member emails a newspaper article pertaining to an upcoming land use plan amendment listed on this is for the board, on the agenda next week to the other 6 board members. The board member indicates that he or she is against this application based on the article, and 3 members reply all to the group stating that they disagree, but the information is very helpful. Was this a Brown Act violation? What do you guys think? Yes, correct. The board members have participated in a discussion of an item within the jurisdiction of the body that was not noticed, open, or public. So again, no reply alls. Okay, so
Can I ask a quick question, just a clarifying question? So let's just say somebody sent that article out and didn't say anything and nobody replied. Is that a Brown Act violation as well?
That in itself is not.
Okay,
But that's kind of my example of, by doing a reply all,
Right.
you're
Okay.
creating a situation where you could, make it easy for a situation to happen where it's like,
Got it.
here's this really interesting comment on this, new
Right.
profit sharing model. And then everyone goes, well, I think we should do, and then people start to give it's hard for people to
right.
resist giving opinions on a reply.
So
all.
if the person sent the article, stated their opinion, it is not yet a Brown Act violation until there's a response creating a discussion. Okay,
Right.
just checking.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, so now we've kind of discussed what, you can't do outside of a public notice meeting. Now we kind of turn a little bit to what the public agendized meeting requirements are. And that's where you can take action on items on the agenda. So there's two requirements for regular meetings. The agendas need to be posted 72 hours before the meeting. And then there's also an opportunity for a special meeting, which is not the regular scheduled time, and that only requires 24 hours posting. Again, exceptions to rules are lawyers' favorite things. So there are some here, and they're kind of common sense. They're an emergency. And with those, it's, there's a need for immediate action came to the agency's attention after posting the agenda. And there are specific findings that need to be made, and there's certain requirements. And I would not really worry about that. This is more for the board of directors. And if there is a situation that a deferred compensation committee would need to meet in either a special meeting or an emergency, they would be consulting with our office and we'd be handling it. So you don't really need to worry about that. Okay, so what do you need to put on the agenda? It must state the meeting time and place. It must contain, this is the legislative language, a brief general description of each item of business to be transacted or discussed at the meeting, including items to be discussed in closed session. You don't need to worry about closed session. That's not going to come before you. So that items to be discussed, it's a brief general description, generally does not need to exceed 20 words. And then some tips for this on how to kind of make the agenda language helpful is each distinct action to be taken should be described on the agenda, and avoid overbroad descriptions of a project if the project is a bunch of different actions. So it's like approve the land use project, but in actuality, there's approving a CEQA document, approving a contract to build something, and then maybe something else. Those are all just distinct actions. And the idea behind that is you just want to make the agenda clear on what you're discussing. So if someone who is interested can look at the agenda and say, oh, that doesn't pertain to me, I'm not interested, but that item is important to me, I want to listen in. So again, yeah, specific, realistic, and results oriented. So this is an interesting slide. I put it together, and because COVID keeps changing, this is also changing. So this slide will probably be modified shortly as well. But right now, we're all meeting remotely, which is acceptable, but that is going to be coming to an end soon. So then the old Brown Acts or standard Brown Acts rules around teleconference are going to return. So this is right now, this is the Governor Newsom's order of an emergency allowing for, remote or relaxed teleconferencing rules due to COVID is going to be sunsetting soon. So there's going to need to be a new approach to meetings, and this will follow whatever the board of directors determines, and they will be most likely weighing in on this in the coming months. So again, the Deferred Comp Committee don't need to worry about how to do this. This will just kind of flow from what the board of directors determines. But generally, the rules that are now is like, you got to be available telephonically, otherwise electronically. A combination of video and teleconference is allowed. And a physical meeting location is not always required, but that is also changing. And this slide is also changing, so stay tuned. Meeting decorum and public participation rights. So we agendized meetings must provide an opportunity for the public to speak regarding any matter within the jurisdiction of the board or committee. Board or committee members can quickly discuss these items and refer them to staff, but you can't take action. So if somebody of the public wants to bring an item that's not on the agenda, but is within your jurisdiction or area of responsibility, and it says, I want you to consider a new contract for this type of service to email out to all participants or whatever, but it's not on your agenda, you can say, oh, it's interesting, we'll bring it to a further item, or staff look into it and put on a future agenda. You can't say, I agree, let's vote on this now and enact that. It has to be on the agenda. So when items are not on the agenda that are brought up from the public, it's a quick discussion. It's not a real, no action can be taken.
Can I ask a few questions on that one?
Mhm.
So on the, sorry, if you could go back one more. So if, for example, if the public came to speak at this meeting and said, I want to talk about oranges, we would be like, that's not within the jurisdiction of this committee, or do we always just allow whatever?
Yeah, I mean, what is, someone could make an argument that maybe oranges are before this committee because all deferred compensation participants should be entitled to 1 orange per day. I don't know.
Sure.
So there's a very like attenuated way to do that. So generally, I would just err on the side of allowing public participation when it's not clear. If it's a special meeting and there's 1 item on the agenda and it's not on that, you do not need to allow for items not on the agenda for public comment. But for a regular meeting, generally, if somebody wants to speak before the board, I would just allow it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the reasons why I would not allow public comments would only be limited to items that are like not protected speech, right? Someone is actually disrupting the meeting, which is very hard standard to meet. So that's not just like you have to allow criticism, and that's this next slide. So comment opportunity on agenda items must occur before or during the consideration, but before any action takes place. And you can't limit negative comments or criticism. So if someone's speaking before the deferred comp and it's just railing against everything the deferred comp committee has done, and it's just very critical, that's okay, and you need to allow that. What is not okay is if they're actually disturbing the meeting, they go past their time, they're creating some sort of like actual disturbance, or they're using speech that is not protected, that is like, you can't yell fire in a crowded building. You can't do that on public comment as well. But generally, allow criticism is kind of takeaway on this one. And just say thank you. Everyone has the right to speak for a few minutes. So public participation rights. So you turn off your phones, but the public does have a right to make audio or video recordings, but know that they can't take over our audio video system. But if someone shows up, this is traditionally more a scenario when there's in-person meetings. But if I'm Joe Public and I go to a meeting and I want to sit and record, I can set up a tripod in the back corner as long as I'm not, otherwise blocking ingress, egress, disturbing the meeting. But if I just want to record it, I'm allowed to do that. And then this is a real kind of just the end kind of why do we care? Brown Act, the main thing is it could, nullify a decision made in violation of the Brown Act's penalties. And also it could create some other penalties, but the main thing is loss of public comment. That is a thing that you want to do. So that is my brief presentation. I think I just stopped my share and I'm available for any brief questions.
Questions for Jason?
Thanks, that was helpful.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Kelly has, sorry, you're right. Public comment. We do have a public comment, I believe, on this item. Kelly, did you want to go ahead and do it now?
Yeah. So one of the requirements in the Brown Act is that you must post agenda 72 hours in advance of a regular meeting. And what government agencies, especially this Park District and the city of Fremont, are doing and like to do and love to do and constantly do is they hide behind this legal cloak, the curtain of we're doing a real estate transaction and we're buying and selling real estate when actually we're just talking about how to operate a park that we've been operating for 50 years and we're going to be operating for another million years. And what they do is they'll hammer out an agreement have this agreement written down, ready to go, and then wait until 73 hours before the meeting to post the operating lease at Mission Peak, for example. So, you know, it could say, God knows what it says. It could say, well, we're going to operate this park for 2 hours on Sundays from noon to 2 p.m. And the other 166 hours of the week, we're going to leave it closed. Whatever, you know, it could say anything. Another thing that the Brown Act requires, you must allow the public to observe the meetings, and you claim to be operating it live today. Now, yesterday, there was like a 40-second delay, such that public commenters like me, who were at a committee meeting of this East Bay Regional Park District. I'm being very critical here because they ran the YouTube 30 seconds behind. Then they brought in, opened up the door, bring you in. So it's as if you're in the room, then you're sent out of the room into the hallway. So you don't know what's happening for 30 seconds. And then you're allowed back into the room to start talking. You have no idea what just happened. And it causes confusion. In this case, it caused confusion for Director Ellen Corbett, the chair of the meeting. And it wasn't really me that was confused. And then finally, so, you know, having these kind of delays, it's not an issue right now because you let me into the Zoom room and I'm up to speed with everybody else. And finally, Brown Act, Government Code Section 54957.5, you must make claims available for public inspection before closed session. So, for example, if one of you files a lawsuit or threatens litigation about your pension benefits or God knows what, and or you get your lawyer to write a letter, you write a letter yourself, you mail in this threat to the legal department of the park district, they must post this before holding the closed session or during the closed session on the agenda for that closed session when they talk about your legal threat. And they've never done this that I've seen. So once again, that's 54957.5. Next time any of you guys wants to make these kind of threats of litigation, doesn't even have to be a real lawsuit. The Brown Act means that your thing is going to be should be posted on the agenda. So a lot of little, you know, legal things on the Brown Act, and some of them just happened yesterday. And I was outraged at what Director Ellen Corbett did to me yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, for your comments. I will have Jason follow up on any issues that might be arising in there. I need to plug my computer in because it's dying. So let me look at the next agenda item. Oh, we have Mesero police report, and that's is that you, Chaz? Or is that, okay, great. So Chaz is going to make a presentation on our police report review. So I will hand that over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So now this is not a typo that says the Q2 investment review. We are expecting the Mesro update to come out in the next week or two. Typically around the 7th week of the quarter is when Mesro releases their quarter end numbers. So and I also am going to turn off my camera for the simple reason that my Wi-Fi seems to be having some difficulties. I don't know if I broke up, but I got a message that my connection was unstable. So I turned off my camera. Hopefully that will be a little better. So what I thought I'd go through is the asset allocation, talk about the Mesero quarterly review. The allocation is not June 30th. That is as of September 30th. But I'm happy to talk through. I also have attached, and Hillis has a copy of this, all of the materials we received directly from Mesero. So for those of you that are seeking a cure to insomnia, you can take those home and read them at your leisure. So without further review, the way the assets are allocated, and this is, you'll see things look a little bit different because of the, in part because of the technology change that Mission Square has been undergoing. But the assets as of September 30th, were about $128.7 million. Now, that was broken up. Roughly a fifth is in capital preservation. That is predominantly the stable value fund. But there is a little bit in cash management. The asset allocation funds, that is the target date and the target risk funds, are another fifth or so. And a very small percentages in the guaranteed retirement income area. Which means that the vast majority of assets are invested in individual strategies, and this is in line with what we see among many of our clients. Certainly, that capital preservation runs anywhere from 15 to about 25 or 30%, depending on which client we're looking at. But the fact is, I think participants are taking advantage of the breadth of the lineup offering. So any questions on how assets are allocated before I move to the Mesero?
Chaz, is the specialty area, is that people investing in individual stuff?
No, that is the real estate. That is the real estate fund. The MSQ used to be Nuveen, it is now Cohen and Steers Real Estate Realty Shares Fund. Okay, good question. All right, so we need to keep our compliance our compliance colleagues helpfully employed. And then, so now we move to the section that is Mesero. Now I have taken the Mesero documents and relayed it directly to your lineup. And so I will go through that shortly, but I want to remind you of what the Mesero methodology is. Now they did drop I think since the last time we did this, they dropped the legal side, and it is now covered under organization and investment policy. They still go through with a fine-tooth comb when they are reviewing different strategies, but they look at the three quantitative strategies. They look at performance, which of course is the relative to peers is predominantly the way they are looking at it. Expenses, making sure that expenses are not a contributing factor to underperformance. Style consistency, making sure that your participants, if they are expecting to invest in a U.S. large cap growth fund, they are in fact getting a U.S. large cap growth fund. And then qualitative measures include the organization structure. If ownership or key personnel changed, then you would see that get flagged. And then the investment policy. If we make a major change in the way we are addressing the management of a fund or any of the funds in your lineup for that matter. And on the Mesero report, you'll see there are green, yellow, red. Green means they are passing in those areas. Yellow means they are monitoring that. It is essentially a recommendation that it move to watch. And then red would be removed from fiduciary coverage this quarter. There are none in the yellow or red categories from your lineup. So what I did was I just took, I downloaded your lineup for your asset allocation funds. You can see everything is green. For your U.S. equity funds, everything is green for both last quarter and, well, first quarter and second quarter. And then the other funds are also all green for first quarter and second quarter in all of the different areas. So everything is passing all of Mesero's standards. Again, we have disclosures. Now in the appendix, I can go through as much or as little of it as you'd like, but again, I think in consideration of time, I probably will not go through all of them. Mesero sends a fairly thick book of what happened in the markets. Although we all are well aware that the first half of the year was not good. The third quarter was also not good from a performance standpoint among virtually every fund. One of the very strange occurrences, very unusual, I think over the last 200 years or 100 years or so, there have been exactly 3 calendar years where both equities and fixed income lost money. And this is one of them. So it's not a great time to be investing, but at the same time, it does bode well for next year. But they go through the different areas of investment. You can see bonds are down, equities were down. It gives you a pretty broad basis. Now, I would say that staying well diversified and staying true to your investment strategy is important, because as this pretty well-known chart shows, there's really no rhyme or reason as to what will outperform or underperform in terms of an asset class. The Mesereau report also goes into the investment review. This is the primary piece that I took out to review your lineup. This methodology should look familiar. And then as we go through, they give a nice high-level summary. And then they go through every single fund that Mesereau covers. And while you don't have exposure to the Carillon Claravest International Fund, you can see that last quarter it was monitoring, red, it was removed from fiduciary coverage. So this is what I look at and match it up against your specific lineup. So you're welcome to go through every fund in the list and compare it to what I've told you. But I'm certainly not hiding anything. I wanted to make sure that you had direct access to everything in this Mesereau report. They go through a lot of details for the ones that are on watch or being removed. Again, it doesn't relate to any of your particular funds. And then they do show the elite list here, which is all of the funds in any given category that they actually cover in the various Morningstar groups. So to the extent any of the funds in your lineup do not meet the requirements for Mesereau, this is the list we would use to identify a replacement. Okay? And that's really everything that I have. I wanted to make sure that you had all of the documents from Mesereau and make sure that that you were aware that it's not related to any of the funds in your line. All of your funds are green and clean. Any questions? Oh,
Yeah.
so Meadow, you just asked if we could forward that to you.
That would be great. Yeah, or forward it to Connie, and then she has the addresses.
I sent it off to Hillis, so to the extent he has any notes or anything that he needs to send you, I think we can attach that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can just send that right after the meeting ends.
Perfect.
Yes, I had go ahead, Pete.
Thanks. I was wondering, since it would be if we had our meeting a week later, we'd be able to review the third quarter rather than the second quarter and be, 7 weeks behind versus a quarter and a half. And maybe for next year, since it's only a week, we should consider moving the meetings up, since this is a fairly significant part of what we're looking at.
I would agree with that, Pete. And the answer to your question is, as soon as we get it from Mesereau, I could use it. It's already sort of compliance cleared because it is through Mesereau. And your contract is with them directly, even though you access them through us. It's one of those things that I believe it might, I think, to be safe, if you were to use the last week of the second month of every quarter, we could consistently have the current quarter end reports in-house.
Did you say if we met in the last week of the month? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
So like, not October, it doesn't come out, the quarter end comes out roughly the middle of the quarter following. So third quarter would come out roughly the middle of November. So if your meeting were moved to instead of this week, you were, say, 2 weeks later, we could pretty comfortably anticipate that the Mesero third quarter reports would be out.
That's a good thought, Pete. Chaz, I wanted you to go back to the page that was in your presentation where it talked about performance, and I just wanted to look at what the criteria was for getting on the yellow or the red list.
Yep. So can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, we'll go back to the methodology then. Here you go. So under performance, they use a precision alpha, which is a quantitative measurement of return rank and risk rank relative to what they call the Mesero peer group, which is a cleaned up version of the Morningstar peer group. Morningstar is a little bit crude in the way they create the peers. And so Mesero cleans that up a little bit, and they identify what the peers are. So they measure return and risk relative to peers. Then they look at 1 year, 3 year, or 5 year trailing return, again, rank relative to the Morningstar category. And then it says additional long-term return. So largely it is relative to its peer group. If the fund is,
I think we're having a hard time hearing you, Chaz.
Yeah.
okay. Hopefully that is a little better when we don't have to deal with the video. So the three, there are two fairly specific points, and that is return rank and risk relative to the Mesero peer group. Then they look at 1, 3, or 5 year returns relative to the Morningstar category. And then they look at other long-term return and risk measures. So while it is a quantitative analysis, it is largely Mesero is making an assessment of whether that fund is performing in line with expectations or not. So it is a return and risk combined categorization.
Okay, I think I'm getting most of what you're saying, although I can't hear it, but I'm just like intuiting what the words that I'm not hearing. I had a question. Is it possible for them to say, like, if they're in the top 50% or the top, as far as the Morningstar rating, like,
I would have to, I could get their investment policy and send to you. I know that was probably part of the initial documents that they sent with the contract, but their investment policy I could send to you. But there is no way to modify it. So
yeah, okay.
I can send it to you, but we can't comment on it. It is completely up to Mesero.
Okay, I am not recalling us receiving the Mesero criteria. So that
I will get their investment policy to you as a follow-up.
Okay,
Mhm.
great.
Anything else?
Yeah, I just had a sort of a general question. So just trying to understand. So Mesero is basically kind of auditing Mission Square to ensure, I know audit.
The funds. They
Loosely
watch the funds, yes.
Right. And so I'm just wondering, is there a reason why Mesero doesn't come and present this? Because it seems like, just in the structure wise, it seems like it would be, weird to hire a company that then, watches those funds, but then you all present it,
Well, the service that they are providing to you is it's basically a boxed service. It is providing oversight to us. If you wanted a consultant to come see you, you would have to negotiate the price directly with them. It would not be under the Mission Square pricing that they offer our clients.
Okay, so the Mesero is offering oversight to Mission Square.
To Mission Square clients.
Mission Square clients.
We do not pay Mesero anything. They do not get compensated. They maintain their independence. Mission Square record keeping clients, whether they have Mission Square funds or not, can contract for this service through Mesero. Basically we provide a contract. Mesero provides us with a contract that we then provide to the client. And any one of Mission Square's record keeping clients could access the service. Most don't.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chaz. Okay. Next up on our agenda is the NAGDA. Let's check our time. Okay, we're a little behind. So the NAGDA conference update. Eric, do you mind giving that update? So there were myself, Eric, and Ben Guzman were able to attend the NAGDA conference. Hillis, we were looking for you, but I heard you had another conference, so you're excused. Did anybody else attend the virtual conference? Nobody? Okay. Okay, so Eric, if you want to give a presentation on what the conference was like and all the great stuff we learned, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Meadow. A lot of, I guess what I'll be presenting today is just kind of some takeaways and lessons learned that perhaps we can discuss more when we get to like the 2023 work plan and even the fiduciary responsibility agenda items today. But just going through a few of the items learned, number one, recommendation for us to review Mission Square's cybersecurity policies and procedures to ensure that Mission Square and the participants are taking steps to safeguard their accounts. Two, to illustrate the investment expenses that participants are paying with Mission Square against those same financial products in a retail brokerage account. A lot of confusion seems to be about still how much people are paying with Mission Square versus if they just go it alone. In that same vein, also creating a fee sheet that is updated at least annually whenever fees change, just to make it really clear all in one place. Third, looking at enrolling in NAGDA's data sharing program for benchmarking. And so this would be very helpful for us to be able to just compare our plan against other plans. Fourth, for administrative allowance accounts, if with those, the common practice seemed to be to hold a balance that is equal to 1 year of expenses. That was a question that's come up a lot over the past year with us. And then five, for those that were attending the NAGDA conference, the absolute general consensus seemed to be that all the committee members and then any relevant members of management related to the plan are attending the conference every year. And then finally, fiduciary responsibilities. Like I said, I think we'll talk about that in the next agenda item.
Yes, thanks, Eric. And so just to expand a little bit on some of the topics that Eric had brought up, the cybersecurity, I think, was kind of an eye-opener for us. You know, you hear about cybersecurity a lot, and you know, blah, 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 change your password, you know, kind of rolls in that same vein. But one of the things they pointed out was that when people have these accounts, you know, there's lots of money in these accounts. And people tend to forget about it, so people get these monthly statements with their bank statements and they're writing checks, or, they're making payments and they're sort of monitoring that on a more frequent basis, but people tend to forget about their retirement income accounts, and that cyber thieves are very aware of this. So they are looking at a large source of money that is not well monitored by the participant. And a lot of times they're able to get in and get the money out very quickly. And of course, with the legislation is now sort of trying to catch up or keep up with this type of cyber theft. So, if somebody charges on your credit card, you can get that money back or credited back to your account. And there's a lot of uncertainty about what would be credited back and, that type of thing. So it is something that is a real concern for all of our members. And one of the biggest, simplest thing that they recommended is for all participants to ensure that they have created a online account for Mission Square. So for example, if you don't have an online account, what will happen is that ability to create one is still out there. And so they will log in and, put in their name, Eric Holmes, they forgot their password, here's the email address, they get the email, then they set up an account and they're able to transfer funds out. And so by not having an online account, you really are more at risk for having those funds subject to cyber threats. So it was very interesting to hear about that specific issue. And then we did talk about what we kind of did a little problem solving after that of how we could encourage that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And then what was it? The admin allowance, that was something that was interesting to hear as well, about having that 1-year reserve, which, something we hear about for all other, types of funds of that nature. So, and then the committee members attending every year was, we were trying to figure out how often people went and who went. And what we found was people pretty much sent the entire committee, plus if they weren't on the committee, legal, finance, and any type of so usually like the head of finance, the head of the legal department. I'm trying to think, Eric, were there like their controller, so different, and then HR, and then that's what it was, and then HR.
Human resources or benefits.
Right, and then there was, of course, lots of union members, retirees that were attending as well. And a lot of people were like, I don't know how I could do this job if I didn't, attend every year. So it was just something to think about. I know that we've been trying, when we first started as committee, we were trying to be very conservative with our admin account and just be very selective about what we did. But I think we all sort of felt this was absolutely invaluable. And I think this is my second time. So Eric, you might want to speak as a first-time person and what your experience was like and how it helped you.
It's definitely one of those things where you think you kind of have a good grasp on things, and then you go to a conference like this and you learn about what you didn't know before, but now you know.
Right.
And definitely in talking with people, just the repetition of going every year, learning the new things, presentation from NAGDA's lawyers, their law firm about different things that have changed. One thing, just, learning at the conference about the fee structure, that the way that we just recently switched over our fee structure is what we should have done, probably a long time ago, but, just learning about, where the industry is going and making sure we're staying up with it.
Yeah, and I think the energy for me too of, being able to take time away from your regular job and focus 100% on, getting participants to be a part of, this plan and, lower fee. I mean, all of those things, it's sort of, once you get immersed in all of these people that have the same nerdy, things that they're looking at, it's really helpful to exchange ideas and say, how are you handling this at your agency? And one of the things we talked quite a bit about was committee makeup. And so we were asking, every time we sat down for lunch, we're like, where do you work? And what does your committee look like? So we were going around really trying to get ideas of what committees were looking like, because we had this question of the fiduciary advisory and things like that. And that was really invaluable to hear different perspectives and why they were advisory, why they were fiduciary, and why they set it up that way, or they used to be one way and they converted to a different way years later for these reasons. And so it was really good to hear all of that information and just to be able to keep current, with sort of the trends that are going on. So can't recommend it enough, and really hope to get everybody there next year. I think it would be very invaluable. I think it's really easy to get caught up in work here and there's just not time, but it was really nice, I think, being there. I remember Eric, me and Ben would sit after every presentation and be like, okay, so how can we do this? And how can we put together a plan? And that was some of the things we came up with on the agenda today. So yeah, it was great experience. Were there any other questions? I'm trying to think if there was anything else that we had learned, or if there's any questions about the conference. Okay. All right. Well, then that will save us a little bit of time on our agenda. So let's see. Okay. So we have this fiduciary responsibility discussion, and I think this kind of rolls into it. So I wanted to just start this off. I know we've visited this quite often, and trying to discuss the type of committee that we think would be best for us to have. Currently, we are advisory with the board as the fiduciary, but we are acting as though we are fiduciary just in order to align with those standards. So so we did ask around, and there was one model that I hadn't heard of before that I thought might help us in our discussions. And that was, there was one committee, and the name is escaping me, but it was in California, and it was somewhere down south. And they said they used to be an advisory, they used to be a fiduciary committee. I know there was like maybe, 10 people on it or something. They used to be a fiduciary committee, but they didn't want to do that anymore because they felt like when everybody's in charge, no one's in charge. And so it seemed like too big of something for all of these committee members to maintain. And so what they decided was to have one person be the fiduciary on the committee. So in their case, I believe it was the controller, but they said, it could be anyone that, just is willing to take the lead on that. But that one person is the fiduciary. That way, the insurance, only has to be for that one person. They're the one that signs documents and, processes things and gets sort of them moving. But the advisory committee, still advises what their recommendations are. So, if there's a change in fees, et cetera, then that person is on the committee. And so they're hearing the discussions of the advisory. They're hearing all of the recommendations. They're participating in that committee. They're not necessarily voting in that committee, but they're hearing all of those discussions. And then they take the action that the committee recommends. And so I thought that was an interesting model that really allowed the advisory committee to be a part of the discussion and be a part of the, committee, but also having one person to carry out the actions of the committee. And, I think what it does is, and this was sort of our concern, at least my concern before, was that having all of the responsibility, but not having a voice or the ability to make solid recommendations. And so if we have, for example, this entire committee is fiduciary, it gets to like, well, who's making the decisions and who's supposed to carry that out and where does that go? And then if you have other people like subject matter experts from the district that then pop in to say, oh, well, I'll sign it. It's like, well, wait, do you know what you're signing? Because you haven't been here at this, what I mean? So it just creates a lot of problems. But if the fiduciary person is at the committee meetings at all times, then, the whole point of having an advisory committee is so that you're not making decisions in a vacuum, right? That the district is not just deciding decisions about people's money without taking into account feedback from the participants or the representatives. And so this way, the fiduciary is receiving that feedback, can take that into account when the decision is finally made. But as a fiduciary, that's their responsibility to take that into account. And should they choose to completely go an opposite direction of the recommendation of the committee, that's their fiduciary, liability that they're taking on for whatever reason. I mean, there may be good reasons for it, but there might not be good reasons. So that's something that they have to then consider. And it also encourages the fiduciary to attend the meetings on a regular basis, go to training, and sort of be a part of the committee on a regular basis. So I thought it was a pretty good, model, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on it. We, don't necessarily have to decide who that person would be, but some other recommendations that I heard was also legal, that because legal eventually, makes these decisions or enters in these contracts and signs these documents and has that sort of final say, that might be a good place to have the fiduciary lay, because they are probably the most up to date on their fiduciary responsibilities and the legalities of that. So just things to consider, but just wanted to throw it out to the group and see if there was any discussion from you all or any thoughts on that.
I'll jump in and hopefully, oh, Pete, go ahead.
You go first.
I was just gonna say, I think this is a really interesting kind of hybrid of what we had talked about before, where we were really stuck on wanting to have all of the great discussion that happens in this committee go somewhere, but then there was also fear of like being the fiduciary. Some people were really reluctant to have that responsibility. So I think this could be a way to your idea of having one person who's part of the committee, who's actually the fiduciary, but then the advisory committee is providing their feedback and they're weighing in on all these decisions. Ultimately, one person makes that decision and then is enacting it. I think that could be a really good way of meeting all of our needs. That's my thought.
All we need is we just need thoughts. just give us your thoughts, because that's going to stimulate discussion. Yes, Pete.
Well, I pretty much was going to say exactly what Deb said, that this is really worth considering. It takes, in addition, it takes the board off the hook, which they would, I imagine they would be happy about. And it has one person, it would obviously have to be a fairly high ranking district employee, I would think, either in finance or in legal, but it would have to be somebody who would have the time to actually come to committee meetings. So having it be the general manager or somebody like that would probably not work. But I think that this is really worth considering, and it would do a lot to solve all the qualms I had about it, for sure.
Great.
I'd like to say, I think this is a really good compromise. I think, I'm looking back at what was provided to us, the memo that was provided to us back in July, I think, from Jason. It's a good hybrid between option 1 and 2, where option 1 was creating an actual fiduciary committee, eliminating the advisory completely, but making it so that the fiduciary was comprised of certain specific people like legal and the GM and HR. And the second option was to have a fiduciary within the advisory committee. So I think this is a good compromise. However, I do think we need to have further discussions if we go this route of who should remain in the advisory committee. Because I think it's grown beyond what we initially started. I think, to your point, Meadow, everyone wants to have a voice, wants to provide recommendations, wants to bring their members' concerns or all that, but we really need to really think about, if we go with the model that you proposed, how the advisory committee will remain.
Yeah, I definitely share that concern too, because I think initially we just sort of put some people together and we said, representative of each group, and then I don't know, HR should be there and finance should be, you know, we kind of just put this together. So I do think that would be an opportunity to revisit that and say, you know, how do we have this be a committee that's a fiduciary? We have whatever the relevant subject matter experts need to be there, but also we have representation of the different groups. So, you know, we've talked before about how, you know, I think it was you and Deb, but like you're kind of representing HR and you're kind of representing finance, but then like who's representing the managers, you know? So it's like, there's these questions like that that aren't really clear on, you know, where that representation is. And so I think revisiting that and seeing like what is the role of everybody and what do we need? I do personally think that the alternates are a good idea that should stay because as you saw today, sometimes people can't get here and it's, you know, these are important decisions, important recommendations that would need to be made. So I think in that respect, having someone that you can proxy your vote to, I think is important because we don't want to have a situation where people are just left out because they couldn't make it. The other is that the reason one of the main reasons we created the alternates was because it was so much work to do. We were just like, we don't have time to do this all the time. And so we created these subcommittees and then we have like alternates like heading the subcommittees. And then that's great because then it's not as much work for the individuals and we can sort of have a larger committee without actually having a larger committee. So, you know, I think that's all part of the discussion for sure. So yeah, I think that would be definitely an important part. I do also think it's really important that, and because I asked him, I said, well, who goes to the training? Who goes to the conferences? And he's like, oh, the whole committee goes, you know, the fiduciary plus the committee. And to me, that makes sense because I don't know how you can be an advisory committee and not know what you're advising on or not have the subject matter, you know, knowledge to advise on it. So I think that's something we could also discuss, you know, depending on how we go forward. There was also, gosh, I had one more thought that just popped in and popped right back out, but there was another discussion too that I wanted to bring it up and I don't remember what it was. Oh, that's what it was. It was meeting more frequently. That was another thing that we sort of discovered at the conference was that like, we have so much to do and it's just not possible. And I think what happens when we come to this quarterly meeting is what are we doing? What happened last, 3 months ago? It's just enough time to forget about it. So I don't think it's enough. And we talked about doing some other initiatives, which is kind of on the work plan. But I think as we look forward, that was another piece of it is how often are we meeting? Don't want to be too much, but also want to make sure that we're reconnecting with the material on a regular basis so that we can make good decisions and not sort of forget, what we were doing in the first place. So are there any other thoughts? Janet, Eric, Jason, who else is here? Anyone? Nothing. Okay. Oh, Deborah, sorry, I missed Deborah. Deborah, did you have any comments?
Hold on a second. Here I am. No, I think it's great to have this discussion to come up with another option. I think the Finance Committee did make a formal request to this advisory committee to ask for a recommendation. And so maybe you could just spend a minute and put this into some kind of general recommendation that we could then bring to the Finance Committee for them to deliberate about in probably the January meeting.
Okay. Okay, here we go. We always end up in this spot, right? Hurry up and make a decision. What I maybe Jason, you can help with this too. What I'd like to do is, if people are okay with the idea, is there a way to sort of make a motion or take an action today that creates a general framework, but that we can work out the details later? Because I don't know if everybody's, just like we talked about, who's on the committee and who is the person, like we don't have all those answers, but if we could maybe I don't know, settle on a general framework? Is there a way to do something like that?
So let me kind of just give some suggestions here.
Sure.
Given that this is going to go to the finance committee with a recommendation, you do not have to do a formal vote and a motion. If there's a consensus and direction, we can take that guidance and then put it into a board material for the finance committee that'll say, this is what they discussed and these are recommendations. And it could be something to that effect. If you want to make a specific motion on a particular format, that's fine. But if it's not like a formal, we want it to be this exact structure. And I don't know if making a motion on kind of general guidelines is necessary. You could just provide the direction it will incorporate. If it's clear that there's one structure that everybody is coalescing around and you want to make a motion, you could do that. It'll make it a clearer, stronger recommendation. But you don't need to actually make a motion just to make a motion.
Sure. Okay, so I think it sounds like there's some support and otherwise no objection to a model in which one person is the fiduciary. I think the question, and maybe it does deserve a little bit more discussion of who that person should be, or what role, not necessarily who, but what do people on the committee think would be a good role for that person to have? Because I do think that's an important part of it. I think is it Meadow? I don't think it should be Meadow because I don't have that role and responsibility, or legal expertise to make those fiduciary decisions. So I'm wondering if we could toss that idea around. Do you think, Jason, is that something that legal would have an interest in, or I don't know?
I think instead of trying to identify the individual, the structure would be a more helpful guidelines. What I'm hearing from the committee is that the idea of the deferred comp committee staying advisory, then identifying one individual as the fiduciary, you can make that recommendation to the finance committee. The finance committee is going to make, and staff will look at it too. I mean, I may have a thought on it. I don't have a thought on it today.
Right.
So as the staff material is presented to the finance committee, they'll probably put some staff recommendation into that in addition to what the deferred comp committee's recommendation is, so that the finance committee can have benefit of both. And then at that point, it's ultimately a board decision. So the board can follow one, both, or none of those recommendations when it ultimately decides whether to keep the structure, change the structure, or do something else.
So I think my concern is that we give a recommendation out of this committee and then the staff report comes up and the committee's never heard of what staff's recommendation, so I just want to avoid that conflict. But I mean, maybe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, but I think, that's why it's the committee's recommendation is one thing. And I don't know if you can guarantee that it'll be the same or not. It probably very well likely may be the same.
Right.
I can't.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is I'm trying to avoid that. So I'm not saying it will or it won't. It may very well line up. If in the case that it doesn't, or in the case that there's a recommendation and then the committee's like, oh, well, actually, that sounds good, except tweak this. I mean, there might be some further, solidifying of that. And so I think the committee would want to have that feedback. So I'm wondering if what we could do is to put this idea forth and have staff, reply with whatever, whatever the staff recommendation would be, I suppose, or close to it. And we can consider that and then make the motion. I just feel like if we're putting forth like, hey, this is our idea, and then we get to the committee meeting and then there's a whole nother idea, or there's yeah, we did it, but we tweaked this, and we're going, no, actually, there's a reason why we, and we don't want to have that in front of the board. So it just seems like I really want to make this decision. I really want to move forward with it. And at the same time, people have to feel comfortable with it. And I want to make sure that we're presenting to the board that we are, working together and we're not, just surprised out of left field with a different perspective. And it may be a very valid perspective and the committee may completely agree with it. I just don't know what it is at this point, since this is sort of the new idea. So what perhaps we could do is we could have just sort of a special meeting or something in December and just do like a quick little vote.
Yeah, or just put when's the next regular deferred comp meeting?
It's quarterly, so it's not till February.
So at the February meeting, that would give staff time to have their recommendation that
Okay.
they look at, right?
Yeah, if we want to wait until February, we can do that. I just wasn't sure if there was some urgency.
As of now, the status is that the board is
Okay.
continuing to be the fiduciary and will act as such until they
Okay.
make change.
Okay.
I think I'm just the realistic of getting a staff report and the recommendation ready to go in a couple weeks.
No rush.
And
I
everything else is challenging. So I think a February where you bring it back to a February committee, they'll give staff
Okay.
time to actually put something in writing that then the committee can say, great,
Right.
committee and staff agree on a structure, or we still are in disagreement. And
Sure.
I appreciate your desire to reach consensus.
Yeah.
It may hopefully get there, but if not, that's okay as well.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm okay with that. Oh, go ahead, Pete.
I think putting the decision off to the January meeting, February meeting, and having both, having some stuff out, having the district make its recommendations at least a month before that, so there's time for us to comment on it, would be advisable. I also think that it should be a clear part of our recommendation, in my mind anyway, and I'd like to know how everybody else feels about it, is that it's essential that whoever this fiduciary is an active committee member and really makes an effort to come to darn near every meeting. I think it should be clear, if that's assuming everybody agrees, that that's a pretty essential part of this, because I think it's not going to work well otherwise. I also think there's sort of two separate issues. There's the one that Monica brought up about the committee structure. And I think that one's still hanging out there and unsettled, and that's an important one too. I don't know that we can necessarily do the two of these things together, and actually knowing if we did set this up with one committee member being the fiduciary, that would maybe make it easier to settle the issue of who's on the committee and are there alternates. And if we knew that, we'd know the basic function of the committee. So I would say we should not try and kill those two birds with one stone, but first do the one and then do the other. That would be my recommendation. And I guess who the fiduciary is ultimately, as Jason, I agree with Jason that that's ultimately the district's decision. And I don't think that should be part of our recommendation.
Okay, so let me see if I can put this into steps. So if it sounds like we are greatly considering the idea of one person being the fiduciary, and that there still remain an advisory committee. So if we could maybe see what the staff, if maybe that could be brought forward, Jason or Deborah, bring that forward to staff and see what their considerations are, and happy to answer questions, comments. Myself or Eric or Ben, went to the conference, so we're happy to talk about any of those type of scenarios, or, hey, if we think this and it's like, oh, well, this other committee did that and it didn't work, like happy to have those discussions, in the meantime. So if we could get the staff report prior to the February 2023 meeting, then that would help inform our decision, and then we can come to a collective, agreement at that point. I think that would be good. And then And also, if there's any recommendations that people have for the structure of the committee, maybe we could also ask that you all provide that ahead of time, and we can put that on the agenda as well, on the February agenda. So that way we can look at those together.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I could be useful here as well. If it would be good for me just to provide like examples of the structures that I most commonly see and that I work with, and people who are in that, say, more plan coordinator role. So that's the person who basically provides that fiduciary oversight,
Sure.
for the plan, would be helpful, just so you can kind of get an idea.
Okay, yeah, if there's someone that you see most often that makes sense, that role, I think that would be good information even for the board to consider as well.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. And just to be clear, like this person, they do attend each of the meetings, and it's not like they're really making decisions on their own, right? That's the point of the committee, is to provide that support and that counsel to make that decision. So ultimately it is a committee decision, but it's who has that authorization to basically sign off and make things basically put in place.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, yes, Deborah.
And I just wanted to acknowledge that in the past, there was a time crunch in getting information to the Finance Committee. And it was a very short, notice staff report sent to the committee on Friday when the meeting was just a few days before. And I understand that did not work well. And so I hear you that getting the staff's recommendation that would go to the Finance Committee is important. By having one more deferred comp advisory committee before it goes to the Finance Committee, I think would help greatly with that. So I agree with that strategy of how to get this brought forward.
Great. I was trying to hurry up for you, Deborah.
Yes.
Really trying, but
yes,
I am happy to take our time. I do think we should take our time, and make sure that, again, getting people on board is going to be the most successful strategy.
Yeah, it's well thought out. All the different options are well thought out.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, great. Yes.
I had a question for Hillis. Is this sort of arrangement something, how common or uncommon is that in your experience?
No, very common. I'd probably say that's how it's set up 8 out of 10 times.
Okay.
Wow, that's useful information. I had no idea.
Great. That's great. Okay. Yeah, I think it would solve a lot of our issues of insurance and all sorts of issues. I think it just solves a lot of those issues. So great. Okay, so we would if the meeting date is February 15th, I don't want to put pressure or anything on anybody, but I also want to give people enough time to review. I mean, is February 1st like reasonable that we could have something, the staff report?
Hey, I'm looking at the calendar and I'm trying to figure out when Finance Committee is.
Oh, yes.
Because
It's usually the fourth Wednesday.
the 22nd then of
Yeah.
February.
Yeah.
So
But then we have noticing, right, requirements. Well, and also, sorry, just to throw, Pete had mentioned about maybe moving the meetings a week out.
right.
And then I'm actually going to talk at the next topic about having more meetings. So maybe we don't worry too much about the date now. We'll just say if Deborah, if you could maybe get it to us by February 1st, we can modify it as we go if it's not working out. And if we end up modifying dates, we'll readjust that date. But just 2 weeks before the meeting would be great to have, let people have time to review it. Okay. And then the committee structure, if everyone could sort of submit, there is a deferred comp email address. It's deferred conference. I have to look at it now. I think it's deferredcomp@ebparks.org. So if you all want to send your thoughts on the committee structure there, I will gather all of those together. And if you can just say, representatives for the following groups, one representative or one plus an alternate or two, whatever it is. And then you know, just whatever recommendations you have for the structure, even if you have a recommendation on who the fiduciary should be, it doesn't, whatever, we'll just take all the input. And, you know, maybe even help the staff report on the other side. So just let us know what your thought process on that is, and we will discuss it again. I'll put it on the agenda for the February 15th one. So structure.
Meadow, I have a
Yeah.
question.
Sure.
Who receives the deferred comp emails?
So that one is me. It was the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary, which I think it's Lupe still. I know I get it. And then I'd have to look to see if it's Dave Collins. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
I'm just curious. I mean, just with the Brown Act presentation that I just gave,
Yes.
curious, I just want to make sure that that's being, you know, handled appropriately as well.
Okay. So right now, so the thought process was, it was the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary is not a member, right? So that would be Connie, and she's not a voting member. So I think that would fall within it. Is that?
Well, if someone a board member is sending their thoughts to two other board members,
Oh, you're right.
that's creating a problem. So let's
Right.
wait on the deferred
Okay.
comp.
Okay, you're right.
Email, maybe just send it to the chair and then CC
Very good.
Deborah Ocker.
Okay.
We can take it from there, and then Deborah can work to kind of filter that information as appropriate.
Is it, wait, so send it where? So
You?
wait, so if it's me and
Well,
Deborah.
I just want to make sure we're using, what was the information you're seeking from that email?
Just the structure, the people's thoughts on the structure of the committee, and we would bring that back to the.
Well, I think we should discuss it either here or at a meeting, in an open
Okay.
meeting.
Okay.
I think that'd be the best.
Then we can do that.
Yeah, and then I think, I mean, from what I've heard from the committee is there's this real interest in maintaining the advisory structure with a fiduciary individual or two, I don't know exactly, but maybe an individual or other type of structure where there's an advisory person or a smaller subgroup that is the actual fiduciary, as opposed to the advisory committee stays advisory. And then there's a layer of a fiduciary on top of that, whether it's one individual or two, I don't know. It could be a sub, you know what I'm saying?
I think it's within the same committee. So it's not advising this one person, like Hillis was saying, it's everybody's on the committee. It's just, there's one person that has signing authority.
And that person is part of the committee?
Correct. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's one person who's identified as the fiduciary,
Right.
but technically they have two hats then. They're part of the committee and they are also the fiduciary. They're part of the advisory committee and they're
Right.
part of the fiduciary. So
Right.
I think at this point, we've gotten the direction. I think it's on staff now to come up with their recommendation based on that direction that you guys can then look at for the February 6th
Right.
meeting. I think we've got work cut out for us essentially to come up with a
Yes.
board. That's why I said we can't do it in a week.
No, and that's fine. Absolutely not. Yeah.
So I think at this point, if board members have feedback about that is beyond this, I would either keep it until the next agendized meeting,
Okay.
be the best, but if there's something like, oh, here's this piece of information that I want you to have as you work on it, just send it to Deborah Ocker and myself.
Okay. I'm just thinking, because Deborah's a member. So is that just one?
Deborah, so I'm on the committee, but Deborah Ocker is not.
Yeah, I'm not currently an official member of the advisory committee, so I wouldn't be subject to the Brown Act, like Jason is trying to avoid discussions that would violate the Brown Act, I think.
So I thought you were Deb Spalding's alternate because you voted on items before.
I'm not listed as an alternate. I think you're right. I may have done that in the past when Deb was not present, but I may not have voted either. I may have just been here.
No, it does list you as an alternate, and I know you voted at one time when Deb Spalding couldn't make it. So that's my only concern. I'm just trying to maintain that.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's good. I can look at the bylaws and confirm that. I think you're right. We have behaved in that manner, but I don't think it was listed in the bylaws.
How about this? Nobody send any ideas. Nobody send any ideas. We will schedule another meeting and we'll talk about it. Okay?
I mean, you can just, I don't.
Send them to
The
Jason.
the alternate thing creates a Brown Act problem as well.
Sure.
That's part of the
Yeah.
the issue is that they're quasi members of the legislative body, and when they are and when they're not, it's not clear. So
Sure.
that's part of the challenge with an alternate. So that's something we need to look at as well. But Meadow, if you have materials from NAGDA, just send them to me and I can.
I don't. Unfortunately, it was all just networking with.
There wasn't any written material. Okay.
No, there was no.
If you have written materials, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
It sounded like Mahillis had agreed to send some from
Yes.
other agencies that might prove helpful.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so let's look at where we are here. Okay, so I think we're good with the fiduciary responsibility discussion. Unless there's any objection to that. The next item is our work plan for 2023. And then we have, it should be peer-to-peer, California, and the leadership award for 2023. So wanted to talk a little bit about that. So as far as work plan for 2023, I think one of the initial things that I brought up was that we really realized that we don't have enough time to meet, or that we're not able to, there's sort of some regular things that we should be doing every quarter. And just getting those done does not leave any room for any other discussions. And so, you know, I know Eric and myself and Ben talked a little bit about maybe meeting more frequently, perhaps every other month, just to have a little bit more time to get some of these things established and cleaned up. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We do have the quarterly meetings scheduled. We can, you know, choose to meet more frequently if we needed to, but that's one topic. Peer-to-peer California is a, when I was at the conference, one of the things that came up was there was some special things that apply to California and CalPERS and things like that. So one of my suggestions, I was talking to the executive director, and one of my suggestions was to have sort of a local chapter of NAGDA that occurred in, say, California, or, you know, by state levels that would address individual issues that are relevant to that state. So I did attend, the peer-to-peer is basically, you know, people coming together and discussing items. And so it's just a discussion forum. So I did attend the last peer-to-peer meeting in October, I think it was, which was a general meeting. Really good discussions there about a variety of topics. But the executive director did establish a California peer-to-peer. So that one is coming up, and I have it on my calendar, but not in front of me. And I think it's next week, perhaps. I think, yes, it's on Tuesday, the 15th, and it's from 11 to 12, and it's called NAGDA Connect Peer-to-Peer Exchange, or P2P Exchange. And if anyone can attend it, that would be great. I think it would be very helpful. But you can bring questions to that and discuss it amongst people that are in California. So this one is specific to California. The other one was more general, but still good information. But this one is on the 11 to 12. So if you can attend that, that would be great. And then the Leadership Award 2023 just was to, when we went to NAGDA, there were leadership awards that were given out for different topics. And Eric, maybe you can talk a little bit more about them and kind of what our plans were for submitting something for the Leadership Awards in 2023. I don't know if Eric's still there. You still with us, Eric?
Yes. I am, yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about our discussions on the Leadership Award?
I think you can kind of lead the discussion maybe, but just by way of background, it's just kind of one of these sort of awards where you can nominate yourself for programs that you are doing or already doing. And I think one of the benefits that we kind of learned from some other groups like Alameda County on one of their awards was it's also a good way to kind of like force yourself to do a program, you know, like if you're like, oh, we're gonna submit, so we should actually follow through on it. So I think that follow through is always, you know, such a major issue. So.
And you were going to say what Alameda County did, like what was their project?
Yeah, Alameda County, theirs was an income replacement study. So it was just kind of looking at their different work groups, different unions, full-time, part-time, that kind of thing, to see kind of was the 457, and in their case 401A, actually working to be able to bridge that gap. And they had some kind of interesting results that, you know, that the 457 amongst their general staff was the most prepared for retirement, as opposed to some of their public safety. So some, you know, interesting things that maybe you wouldn't expect that they learned through their study.
Yeah, and then other agencies just did campaigns, like outreach campaigns and participant education campaigns. And so they have different categories. They had like cybersecurity, participant education. I can't remember, you know, what else there was, but there was like 4 or 5 different categories. And, you know, we kind of thought about like, this would be a good motivation for us to actually do some projects that, you know, we always say we're going to do, but we just don't ever get around to. And so, for example, we were trying to find something that was very low effort, you know, high impact. And we thought of doing something as simple as, you know, some sort of contest, so to speak, where we tell participants, like, you know, go make an online account with Mission Square, you know, enroll in Mission Square, you know, look up your balance, you know, just sort of these little tasks, you know, little scavenger hunt tasks where it's like, hey, if you do these things, you get so many points, you know, for each task. And then we collect all the points at the end, and then we do a drawing, and, you know, we give you a prize for having, you know, for being drawn, you know, having the most points. So that way, every time someone does one of those actions, they get points. You know, meet with Kim Hammond, you know, and review your portfolio, you know, different tasks they could do. And so we're like, you know, we could probably focus on the cybersecurity aspect of make an online account, you know, and so you could do that. And then what were some of the others? I think it was make an appointment with Kim Hammond, you know, like just different things. So we were like something really simple, 3 things that they could do. And if they do them, they get points, you know, and then we put all of them in a drum, and then they win a Starbucks gift card or something to that effect. And I know Mission Square, put you on the hook, Hillis. Mission Square said they would help us out with those prizes. That there, you know, might be something you all could do, or even help with some of the data collection on that, you know, or whatever. And so I don't know if there's other agencies that you've worked with that have done similar campaigns, and how you've been able to help them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that was one of the things actually I was going to bring up maybe towards the tail end here, was that I know we've had a lot of important things going on in terms of just structuring the committee and going over fiduciary responsibilities in the Brown Act. But one of the reasons we are here is to kind of implement those themes and those, you know, educational campaigns. So I don't know if we have time, like during the you know, the actual committee meeting, but maybe we do some, you know, meetings in the interim and just kind of get those things in place. One of those you kind of hit on that I thought would be a good idea is starting to incorporate more of the Financial Wellness Center. The Financial Wellness Center now actually does have a point system. So points are automatically being tracked when people are, I guess, following the recommendations based off the questionnaires that they're doing, or when they put in just their overall situation into the program. So I thought that would be a good idea is to kind of meet. Yes, yeah, just maybe in December or something like that, outline a just the themes for 2023, and then start incorporating some of those ideas that you did mention.
Right. So yeah, so we were thinking, you know, none of us have a ton of time, but that, you know, there could be these really low effort type of campaigns that we could do, and then we could submit for the award, and maybe we get it, but maybe we don't, but at least we're a little bit more accountable and like actually trying to get some of that done. So I thought that was kind of a good goal to have. So that was one thing that I wanted to kind of get on our 2023 work plan was what were the categories, and which category we're going to go for, and what does that look like? So we do have a participant outreach committee, which I think, is that you, Pete?
Yep.
Yes. So I don't know if the subcommittee wants to maybe, have a subcommittee meeting or something. Oh, a Brown Act. I don't know. As long as there's no more than 2, is that correct, Jason?
What's the subcommittee?
The participant outreach education subcommittee.
And how many people are in that committee?
Pete, do you know?
Well, at one point we had 4, but there's been some personnel changes, so
Yeah, I mean,
3 or 4, would that suffice?
and it's a standing committee that's constantly meeting, or is it?
No, it's an ad hoc.
Let's-
Yeah, just as needed.
Let's put a pause on that until we kind of get the structure set up,
Okay.
because standing committees could technically be a Brown Act committee as well. They would have to post agendas and whatnot, and I think that sounds like a lot of effort for what seems to be a kind of limited one-time basis type of situations, and those could be dealt with in a more efficient
Okay.
manner. So I think if that's okay, my suggestion would be to wait.
Yeah.
To,
Okay. Well, yeah, and
assign
so
things to a committee until we get the structure
Sure.
hammered out.
okay. Well, that's something we could also just fold into this meeting for the moment, and
Yeah.
we'll keep doing that. So okay, yeah, and I think having that goal and just having something to focus on would be helpful for us, and also to get us a little bit more back on track, back to what we're trying to educate our participants, and get some of those tasks done, and have a few wins for ourselves, because I think we're just sort of bumbling around trying to figure out our structure, and it's like, okay, can we actually do the fun stuff and teach people about investing in their retirement? And that could be something. And my thought process too was like, maybe it's a safety fair, we could have a booth at the safety fair, and maybe we draw the name there. It could be something that we tie to existing district events. October is also Retirement Security Month, and I think the safety fair is in September. So I don't know, we can figure that out, but just wanted to bounce some ideas about that. So as far as for 2023, we do have the quarterly meetings in our work plan, and I do have a list of items that need to be done every quarter. So like when the NAGDA conference comes, I think the quarter before, we decide, who's going. We also have on our agenda the admin account. So how are we going to pay for Mesero in 2023? How are we going to pay for NAGDA? So we're going to have to do some establishing on that. So I don't know if anybody has an idea. So I know Deb and I were like, trying to put a work plan together, but there's a lot.
So I wanted to go to your first thought, which is meeting quarterly, and I agree it's not really working. And I hesitate to say that we should meet once a month, because that's too much, but maybe every other month. Maybe we can make the meetings shorter, because
Right.
these always feel like torture by the end.
Yeah.
And so maybe like, I don't know, an hour and a half every other, and maybe we switch to starting in January, since that would help us get ready for our February Finance Committee if we met in January.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we maybe be better on the cycle for getting the quarterly police report, assuming we stick with the Mesero plan. So I guess that would be a little bit of extra work for Connie, being our person who has to post everything for the Brown Act, but hopefully she'll be okay with that. Sorry, Connie.
No problem. So just in the timing, so anyway, we'll talk later. We'll talk about the meetings. I just want to make sure we get those quarterly ones in.
Yeah.
Seemed pretty
I mean,
important.
Are we okay? What do you want to just, I think we might be able to switch to every other month.
Every other month, starting in January?
Is that okay with
What do
everybody
people
here?
think about that?
Well, one alternative is to move the quarterly meetings back a couple of weeks so we can get those police reports, and then put stick 2 other meetings there and have 6 meetings a year, but not necessarily every other month, because the quarterly is an important part of it. But just add 2 meetings.
Oh, I see what you're
Have
saying.
them be a little more focused on whatever the issue of the moment is.
Topics. Okay. Thoughts on that?
Sure. I like having stuff a little more regularly scheduled, but that's, you know, we end up moving stuff anyhow, so.
Yeah. So would we add a January and a? Sorry, there's noise outside. January and a. I don't know. It seems more complicated than just making it every other month. I'm lost already.
I mean, right now, our 2023 dates are February, May, August, November, adding 2 additional ones. I don't know where we would fit it in.
Yeah.
So if we move the quarterly to find every other month now, would make it much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we would do, it would be January, March, May, July, September, and November.
And that would catch the Mesero reports or the police data.
I'm assuming that would be the like the last Wednesday of every month.
That's tricky because that can be finance committee. If we do the last Wednesday.
Does it have to be a Wednesday or can it be a
This
Thursday?
Wednesday, can we pick a different day? Thursday would be great. Anyone have any thoughts on Thursday?
Say we just pick a
Thursdays, second Thursday of every month, I have a conflict. So
So
otherwise they're fine.
are you guys suggesting changing the schedule today, or are you just
No.
getting direction for the
No.
next meeting?
What are you asking,
Would this be
Jason?
under the work plan item that we're discussing right now?
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are just, is that what you asked? Are we discussing changing the schedule? Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
It'd be great to at least nail down the January meeting with
Yeah.
the people that are here.
Pete, did you say you could or could not?
On the second Thursday of every month is bad. Any other Thursday is fine.
Okay.
So third Thursday?
Or the fourth
First.
Thursday would be even better because that'd be the day after finance committee. So that would be, I think, a little better. What do you think, Connie, Deborah?
January 26th work for everybody?
Works for now.
And same time, same place, 10:30, 12:30?
Let's make it shorter if we're gonna meet every other month, then
10:30 to 12.
yeah.
Okay.
Are we gonna
got
do
it.
every other month or are we just picking January?
Let's say every other month. Does anyone not like that idea?
I think we should just change it. And
You can always cancel a meeting. I
I mean, we
think
can always reschedule it. Like, so if we just set it out for the year and then if we're like, oh my gosh, this Thursday thing isn't working, we can fix it. So I say, let's just do the January, March, May, July, September, November. Sorry.
Okay, sounds good. So it'll be the last Thursday of every month. Pete, that's okay with you, right?
That would be fine with me.
Perfect.
The only drawback I see to it in general is that we wouldn't be getting the police reports as regularly as if we did it quarterly.
I think we would, because if we, I think Chaz was saying if we just wait 1 week, so now that we're pushing out to the end of the month, we would get the quarterly. So we, like he was saying, the November or the Q3 report would be ready in like 1 week. So
Well, at worst, it would be 1 month later, which wouldn't be a tragedy. I'm fine with that.
yeah, okay, cool.
You can always adjust if it's not working.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, I'm sorry, is that really loud for you all?
No.
Okay. So as far as the meetings, I think we can get that set, and then maybe in January, we can put a couple things on the agenda, and one of them could be our work plan. and maybe the leadership award, we can look at those two things, and I'll put together whatever else, should be on that meeting.
I'm sorry, Meadow, what was the second one? Oh, awards. Did you say awards?
Leadership award.
Leadership awards. Okay, thank you.
And then like finalizing the fiduciary
Yes.
discussion.
Yes, fiduciary discussion, I think, yeah. Everybody think about it.
And then again, just to be clear, I guess on the proper way to send just the overview of what I see. Jason, who should that go to? Or what would be the best method of
Why
delivering
don't
the
you
information?
email it to me and Deborah Ocker?
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't hear any of that. What was the last thing you said?
I just asked Hillis to email the examples of other structures to me and Deborah Ocker.
Okay, so is that not something that can go to the committee or?
They can, but I would like to be the one to distribute it so that it's not creating a serial meeting.
Okay, do you want to have them just send it to you then, since Deborah's a member of the committee, or?
That's fine.
Okay.
Just send it to me, Hillis.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay, so last we have is public comments. The public.
I guess I'm not public, but I wanted to ask if you would send out that information to us for the Tuesday meeting that you talked about. Is it a Zoom meeting?
Yeah, peer to peer. I think if you're on the NAGDA, it comes through your NAGDA thing, so you can look there. But I'll go back and check and forward it.
Thanks.
One last thing I would like to say is we've talked about this a lot, but it never seems to happen. But it would really be useful for the education and outreach to know on a month-by-month basis, or at least quarter-by-quarter, what the planned participation rates are, to know whether what we've been doing is having any effect. Is there any possibility of getting that information?
Yeah.
Put that on our work plan. It sounds like we're maybe moving away from the subcommittee.
Is that something we could do, Hillis, at every meeting, have the participant rates presented? Is that something you would be able to bring, or?
Yeah, so I can go over just some general information each meeting. So just updating people on the plan statistics as well as the participation, maybe a slight education coming up for the upcoming month, or and even give well, probably go over the previous month then, and then just give a preview for the upcoming.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, great. All right, it is 12:31.
Sorry, I was going to make one last comment
Sure.
as well. I know we touched on peer benchmarking, so that is actually something that we are doing currently as well, just with that transition to the technology, to the new technology. So I can go over some peer benchmarking stuff as well if you think that's helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and see you in January. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.